Hi, it's November 11th, 2014, and today at the Melancholy Whisk we are celebrating, or remembering more, the occasion of Veterans Day here in the U.S., or as known to the rest of the world still, Armistice Day, the celebration of the end of World War I, or at least the fighting in World War I. And I'm going to be doing that by celebrating Uh, one of the things that a frontline soldier in World War I might have eaten in his trench. I've got my fire going, which might well have been a luxury for a lot of soldiers from 1914 to 1918. If you were lucky, you might have a camp stove, or the battalion kitchen might be close enough to you to get something to eat that was hot. But a lot of times, of course, if you were in the front lines, you didn't have either dry wood or a camp stove, or you were out of fuel. And of course, a lot of times they just went hungry because they had no food at all. Or they were able to just eat cold, canned soup. But today I'm going to be making what they called trench stew. And to make trench stew, I have corned beef, known as bully beef to the Tommies back then, goat-flavored bouillon. They had some flavorings in their food, and I figured why not goat. Turnip, 2 carrots, and instead of my chef's knife, I'm going to be using my Swiss Army knife, because they certainly would not have carried around a 12-inch chef's knife in their pack unless they were a cook. So, here we go. That alarm was set for 10:55. It's 5 minutes till 11, and exactly the 96th anniversary of the end of the firing in World War I. Here in a minute, I'm going to take a second and just be quiet and watch the fire burn. It's only been a week since I found out that I was going to have to go on a low-sodium diet for the sake of my heart. And part of the problem with doing something like trench stew, if you're on a low-sodium diet, is that in the days before refrigeration, a la World War I, if you were a country sending food to your troops overseas, you needed to preserve the food a different way, which was usually by salt. So there's probably going to be a fair amount of salt in this. Here we're going to put a pint of water on to boil. Don't do what I did and forget to put the lid on it, or it will never boil. And here we're going to go for a little flavor. We have our goat bouillon here. And bouillon is absolutely loaded with salt. We're not going to use this whole big tablet here, which is a good thing. And they probably, historically, Tommies wouldn't have had all that much seasoning with their food, but they did have some. And but still, this is going to be a lot, so I may not be eating all that much of this stew. We'll have to see. So we're going to put that in there and let it start dissolving. And then we go for our carrots. I don't generally, if I'm just eating a carrot, which I do, eat the end pieces. I don't care for them. I haven't really since I was a child. But if you are part of a machine gun squad in no man's land, maybe in a machine gun nest, and this is what you have for dinner, you're probably not going to turn your nose up at any part of a fresh vegetable. So, when carrots roll, of course, when you cut them into rounds, so be careful. So, we're going to use the ends in every part of the carrot that there is to use. Next up is our friend the turnip. I'm not generally a big fan of turnips. In fact, I don't know that I have ever cooked with one before. I kind of don't think so. But if you were a soldier on the Western Front between 1914 and 1918, you probably wanted some vegetables at least, and really the only way you were going to get fresh vegetables, unless you grew them, and some soldiers did, particularly in the supply lines behind the front lines, uh, was if you got from the home front things that wouldn't spoil on the transit from the farm to you. And so that meant, in general, a lot of turnips. So, all right, turnips can roll too. Obviously, we're not going to not use that piece just because it fell on the ground. I mean, you're in a muddy trench. God only knows the smells and everything else. So we're going to pick that back up and use it. We're not going to peel it either because, again, you're going to be frugal with everything that you get in terms of food. And you're going to want to probably eat the peel. The peel is perfectly edible on a turnip anyway. So we're just going to cut this into a rough dice. Like I say, I'm not very used to cooking with turnips. So that's all going to go in the pot, and we're going to see how this turns out after we get everything else in. Finally, we get to our protein, the corned beef, or again, as the Tommies would have called it, the bully beef. Bully beef being, I gather, a bastardization of a French term that the French used for the same thing. Tommies were very fond of that, making up their own pronunciations for French terms in the way that Ypres, as in the Battle of Ypres, became wipers, because it's kind of what it looks like to someone who does not speak French. If you've never used one of these keys to open a tin, they're really interesting. They always make me think of sardines, which I love. But they're a little difficult to get the hang of sometimes, and they don't always work very well. It's kind of hard to know exactly sometimes which way you're supposed to go. I think I probably should have torn the paper off this one first before trying to use it, and I think honestly I should have taken the key off and turned it around because, as you see, it sometimes breaks. This is the point that a Tommy probably would have used his bayonet to open the damn thing. I have to go get a can opener. And then we wait. If I was actually a Tommy on the Western Front, I might use this time to clean my Lee Enfield or something along those lines. But I don't have a Lee Enfield, and I'm not a soldier. So I sit, and I watch, and I wait. Alright, lads, here we go. I'm sorry, that was horrible. Chris has just been walking around imitating a Cockney accent lately, so I've kind of picked up on it. Anyway, here it is in all its glory. So let's try it. Got a carrot, piece of carrot, 2 chunks of turnip, and sort of a little smattering of the ground beef in here with some broth. It's salty. It tastes like salt. But then again, if you're in a trench or a foxhole, I don't imagine you'd probably mind salty, especially if it's warm. Now that really needed to be cooked longer because the vegetables aren't very tender. But really, I mean, I'd eat it if I had to, if I was really hungry. The salt is pretty incredible. I mentioned the amount of salt in the corned beef earlier, but the goat bouillon that we used is even more. One serving of this stuff is 870 milligrams of sodium, and they call a serving half of this guy. And I used maybe a quarter of this, so we're talking, you know, on the order of 430, 440 milligrams of sodium in this one pot. If I were to eat the whole thing, I'd probably get 70 or 80% of my daily allowance of sodium. But I'm not going to do that. I'll have to find something else to do with it. I'm not going to throw it away. But I'm not going to sit here and eat the whole thing.